Loading, 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 loading. Hello, welcome to Ebony Storytelling. We were doing a really boring loading thing for a while, but my daddy is here. He's going to be doing the Bible. Then we are going to be doing the joke of the day again.
Yay!
With Daniel here. Daniel, say hi. Come over here, Daniel.
It's okay, JJ, just go on.
But Kim's going to be doing the synopsis, and Dad's going to be reading. I'm so used to saying that.
What am I going to read?
20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Part 2. I'm going to go.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Oh gosh, this light is going to blind people. Okay, so I needed it when we were reading Narnia, but not so much when I'm on the computer here. Okay, so here we are with the Genesis chapter 43. The English Standard Version of the Bible. Here's your link. And boom, there it is. And all right. Now the famine was severe in the land, and when they had eaten the grain that had been brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go again, buy us a little food." But Judah said to him, "The man solemnly warned us, saying, 'You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy you food. But if you will not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, You shall not see my face unless your brother is with you.' Israel said, 'Why did you treat me so badly as to tell the man that you had another brother?' They replied, 'The man questioned us carefully about ourselves and our kindred, saying, Is your father still alive? Do you have another brother?' What we told him was in answer to these questions. Could we in any way know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" And Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, both we and you, and also our little ones. I will be a pledge of his safety. From my hand you shall require him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame forever. If we have not delayed, we would now have returned twice." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be so, then do this. Take some of the choice fruits of the land in your bags and carry a present down to the man, a little balm and a little honey, gum, myrrh, pistachio nuts, and almonds. Take double the money with you. Carry back with you the money that was returned in the mouth of your sacks. Perhaps it was an oversight. Take also your brother and arise. Go again to the man. May God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, and may he send back your other brother and Benjamin. And as for me, if I am bereaved of my children, I am bereaved." So the men took this present, and they took double the money with them and Benjamin. They arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of the house, "Bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon." The man did as Joseph told him and brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house, and they said, "It is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we are brought in, so that he may assault us and fall upon us to make us servants and seize our donkeys." So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke with him at the door of the house and said, "Oh, my lord, we came down the first time to buy food. And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we have brought it again with us, and we have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put our money in our sacks. He replied, Peace to you, do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money. Then he brought Simeon out to them. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkeys fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they heard that they should eat bread there. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with them, and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare, and said, Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive? They said, Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive. And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son. Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out. And controlling himself, he said, Serve the food. They served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with them by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him. That's the end of chapter 43. And now we're going to move on to the joke of the day. And here's Daniel.
I'm expecting a patient in a minute now.
Hello, doctor, I feel like a different time.
I'll deal with you later. Now get out of here. Get out of here.
That's so funny. Okay, so they're just little funny dudes. All right, so now it's time for the synopsis. Here comes Kimberly. Rebecca's not on. Have we done the links? Okay, Rebecca's not on yet.
So what happened in the last few chapters was they decided to go pearl hunting. So they went over onto the shore and they got a lot of pearls. And there was this one guy who was also getting pearls. And he got attacked by a shark. And Captain Nemo, he attacked the shark. And I keep forgetting his name, but the harpooner guy, Ned Land, he shot his harpoon straight through the shark and killed it. And then Captain Nemo gave the guy a bag of pearls. So that's basically what happened in the last part of the chapter. And I'm gonna hand it over to Dad. Oh my gosh.
That was there. Yeah, I have the cord here today because it wasn't plugged in all day. So okay, it's okay. It's okay. All right, so here we go. Chapter 4, the Red Sea. Remember, we're in part 2 now, so this is chapter 4. Okay, yeah, we'll get the recap for you a little later, okay, Daniel? Daniel? We'll get the recap for you a little later. Okay, in the meantime, just pay attention. In the course of the day of the 29th of January, the island of Ceylon disappeared under the horizon, and the Nautilus, at a speed of 20 miles an hour, slid into the labyrinth of canals which separate the Maldives from the Laccadives. It coasted even the island of Kiltan, a land originally coralline, discovered by Vasco da Gama in 1499, and one of the 19 principal islands of the Laccadive archipelago, situated between 10 degrees and 14 degrees 30 minutes north latitude and 69 degrees 50 minutes 72 seconds east longitude. That's a very detailed description of where it is. So somebody look that island up for us and let us know where that is if you can. We had made 16,222 miles, or 7,500 French leagues. That's French leagues again, so there's your computation right there. If you did a ratio 1-to-1, there you can find out exactly how far a French league is at that time. From our starting point in the Japanese seas, the next day, 30th of January, when the Nautilus went to the surface of the ocean, there was no land in sight. Its course was north-northeast in the direction of the Sea of Oman, between Arabia and the Indian Peninsula, which serves as an outlet to the Persian Gulf. It was evidently a block without any possible egress. Where was Captain Nemo taking us to? I could not say. This, however, did not satisfy the Canadian, who that day came to me asking where we were going. We are going where our captain's fancy takes us, Master Land. His fancy cannot take us far, then, said the Canadian. The Persian Gulf has no outlet, and if we do go in, it will not be long before we are out again. Very well, then. We will come out again, Master Land. Excuse me. And if, after the Persian Gulf, the Nautilus would like to visit the Red Sea, the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb are there to give us entrance. I need not tell you, sir, said Ned Land, that the Red Sea is as much enclosed as the Gulf, as the Isthmus of Suez is not yet cut, and if it was, a boat as mysterious as ours would not risk itself in a canal cut with sluices. And again, the Red Sea is not the road to take us back to Europe. But I never said we were going back to Europe. What do you suppose, then? I suppose that, after visiting the curious coasts of Arabia and Egypt, the Nautilus will go down the Indian Ocean again, perhaps cross the Channel of Mozambique, perhaps off the Mascarenhas, so as to gain the Cape of Good Hope. And once at the Cape of Good Hope, asked the Canadian with peculiar emphasis, well, we shall penetrate into the Atlantic, which we do not know yet. Ah, friend Ned, you are getting tired of this journey under the sea. You are surfeited with the incessantly varying spectacle of submarine wonders. For my part, I shall be sorry to see the end of a voyage which is given to so few men to make. For 4 days, till the 3rd of February, the Nautilus scoured the Sea of Oman at various speeds and at various depths. It seemed to go at random, as if hesitating as to which road it should follow, but we never passed the Tropic of Cancer. In quitting this sea, we sighted Muscat for an instant, one of the most important towns of the country of Oman. I admired its strange aspect, surrounded by black rocks upon which its white houses and forts stood in relief. I saw the rounded domes of the mosques, the elegant points of its minarets, its fresh and verdant terraces, but it was only a vision. The Nautilus soon sank under the waves of that part of the sea. We passed along the Arabian coast and Marah and Hadramaut for a distance of 6 miles, its undulating line of mountains being occasionally relieved by some ancient ruin. The 5th of February, we at last entered the Gulf of Aden, a perfect funnel introduced into the neck of Bab el-Mandeb, through which the Indian waters entered the Red Sea. Okay, so I just want to point out, because we're at the 5th of February, and yesterday we were at the 28th of February. So what that tells me is that I think that was a typo. I think that when it said 28th of February, it actually meant 28th of January when they were at the island where they were doing they're looking for the pearls. So the 6th of February, the Nautilus floated in sight of Aden, perched upon the promontory which a narrow isthmus joins to the mainland. Oh, excuse me, I'm so sorry. A kind of inaccessible Gibraltar, the fortifications of which were rebuilt by the English after taking possession in 1839. I caught a glimpse of the octagon minarets of the town, which was at one time the richest commercial magazine on the coast. I certainly thought that Captain Nemo, arrived at this point, would back out again, but I was mistaken, for he did no such thing, much to my surprise. The next day, the 7th of February, we entered the Straits of Bab el Mandeb, the name of which in the Arab tongue means the Gate of Tears. To 20 miles in breadth, it is only 32 in length, and for the Nautilus, starting at full speed, the crossing was scarcely the work of an hour. But I saw nothing, not even the island of Perim, with which the British government was fortified, the position of Aden. There were too many English or French steamers in the line of Suez to Bombay, Calcutta to Melbourne, and from Bourbon to Mauritius, furrowing this narrow passage for the Nautilus to venture to show itself. So it remained prudently below. At last, about noon, we were in the waters of the Red Sea. I would not even seek to understand the caprice which had decided Captain Nemo upon entering the Gulf, but I quite approved of the Nautilus entering it. Its speed was lessened, sometimes it kept on the surface, sometimes it dived to avoid a vessel, and thus I was able to observe the upper and lower parts of this curious sea. The 8th of February, from the first dawn of day, Mocha came in sight, now a ruined town whose walls would fall at a gunshot, yet which shelters here and there some verdant date trees. Once an important city containing 6 public markets and 26 mosques, and whose walls, defended by 14 forts, formed a girdle of 2 miles in circumference. The Nautilus then approached the African shore, where the depth of the sea was greater. There, between 2 waters, clear as crystal, through the open panels, we were allowed to contemplate the beautiful bushes of brilliant coral and large blocks of rock, clothed with the splendid fur of green variety of sights and landscapes along these sandbanks and Algian Fuji. What an indescribable spectacle, and what variety of sights and landscapes along these sandbanks and volcanic islands which bound the Libyan coast. But where these shrubs appeared in all their beauty was on the eastern coast, which the Nautilus soon gained. It was on the coast of Tehama, for there not only did this display of zoophytes flourish beneath the level of the sea, but they also formed picturesque interlacings which unfolded themselves about 60 feet above the surface, more capricious but less highly colored than those whose freshness was kept up by the vital power of the waters. JJ, come on. What charming hours I passed thus at the window of the salon! What new specimens of submarine flora and fauna did I admire under the brightness of our electric lantern! The 9th of February, the Nautilus floated in the broadest part of the Red Sea, which is comprised between Suakin on the west coast and Comfida on the east coast, with a diameter of 90 miles. That day, at noon, after the bearings were taken, Captain Nemo mounted the platform where I happened to be, and I was determined not to let him go down again without at least pressing him regarding his ulterior projects. As soon as he saw me, approached and graciously offered me a cigar. As soon as he saw me, he approached and graciously offered me a cigar. Well, sir, does this Red Sea please you? Have you sufficiently observed the wonders it covers, its fishes, its zoophytes, its parterres of sponges and its forests of coral? Did you catch a glimpse of the towns on its borders? Yes, Captain Nemo, I replied, and the Nautilus is wonderfully fitted for such a study. Ah, it is an intelligent boat. Yes, sir, intelligent and invulnerable. It fears neither the terrible tempests of the Red Sea, nor its currents, nor its sandbanks. Certainly, said I, this sea is quoted as one of the worst, and in the time of the ancients, if I am not mistaken, its reputation was detestable. Detestable, Monsieur Aronnax. The Greek and Latin historians do not speak favorably of it, and Strabo says it is very dangerous during the Estian winds and in the rainy season. The Arabian Idrisi portrays it under the name of the Gulf of Kulzum and relates that vessels perish there in great numbers on the sandbanks and that no one would risk sailing in the night. It is, he pretends, a sea subject to fearful hurricanes, strewn with inhospitable islands, and which offers nothing good either on its surface or in its depths. Oh, may I see, I replied, that these historians never sailed on board the Nautilus. Just so, replied the captain, smiling, and in that respect moderns are not more advanced than the ancients. It required many ages to find out the mechanical power of steam. Who knows if another 100 years we may not see a second Nautilus. Progress is slow, Monsieur Aronnax. It is true, I answered. Your boat is at least a century before its time, perhaps an era. What a misfortune that the secret of such an invention should die with its inventor. Captain Nemo did not reply. After some minutes' silence, he continued, You were speaking of the opinions of ancient historians upon the dangerous navigation of the Red Sea. It is true, said I, but were not the fears exaggerated? Yes and no, Monsieur Aronnax, replied Captain Nemo, who seemed to know the Red Sea by heart. That which is no longer dangerous for a modern vessel, well-rigged, strongly built, and master of its own course, thanks to obedient steam, offered all sorts of perils to the ships of the ancients. Picture to yourself those first navigators venturing in the ships made of planks sewn with the cords of the palm tree, saturated with the grease of the sea dog, and covered with the powdered resin. They had not even instruments wherewith to take their bearings, and they went by guess amongst currents of which they scarcely knew anything. Under such conditions, shipwrecks were and must have been numerous, but in our time, steamers running between Suez and the South Seas have nothing more to fear from the fury of this gulf, in spite of contrary trade winds. The captain and passengers do not prepare for their departure by offering propitiatory sacrifices, and on their return they no longer go ornamented with wreaths and gilt fillets to thank the gods of their neighboring temple. I agree with you, said I, and steam seems to have killed all gratitude in the hearts of sailors. But, Captain, since you seem to have especially studied this sea, can you tell me the origin of its name? There exist several explanations on the subject, Monsieur Aronnax. Would you like to know the opinion of the chronicler of the 14th century? Willingly. This fanciful writer pretends that its name was given to it after the passage of the Israelites, when the Pharaoh perished in the waves which closed at the voice of Moses. A poet's explanation, Captain Nemo, I replied, but I cannot content myself with that. I ask you for your personal opinion. Here it is, Monsieur Aronnax. According to my idea, we must see in this appellation of the Red Sea, a translation of the Hebrew word Edom, and if the ancients gave it that name, it was on account of the peculiar color of its waves. But up to this time I had seen nothing but transparent waves, and without any particular color. Very likely. But as we advance to the bottom of the gulf, you will see the singular appearance. I remember seeing the Bay of Tor entirely red, like a sea of blood. And you attribute this color to the presence of microscopic seaweed? Yes. So, Captain Nemo, it is not the first time you have overrun the Red Sea on board the Nautilus. No, sir. As you spoke a while ago of the passage of the Israelites and the catastrophe to the Egyptians, I will ask whether you have met with the traces under under the water of this great historical fact? No, sir, and for a good reason. What is it? It is that the spot where Moses and his people passed it, where the spot where Moses and his people passed is now so blocked up with sand that the camels can barely bathe their legs there. You can well understand that there would not be water enough for my Nautilus. And the spot? I asked. The spot is situated a little above the Isthmus of Suez, in the arm which formerly made the deep estuary when the Red Sea extended to the Salt Lakes. Now, whether this passage were miraculous or not, the Israelites nevertheless crossed there to reach the Promised Land, and Pharaoh's army perished precisely on that spot. And I think that excavations made in the middle of the sand would bring to light a large number of arms and instruments of Egyptian origin. That is evident, I replied, and for the sake of archaeologists, let us hope that these excavations will be made sooner or later, when new towns are established on the isthmus after the construction of the Suez Canal, a canal, however, very useful to the vessel like the Nautilus. Very likely, but useful to the whole world, said Captain Nemo. The ancients well understood the utility of a communication between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean for the commercial affairs, but they did not think of digging a canal direct, and took the Nile as an intermediate. Very probably, the canal which united the Nile to the Red Sea was begun by Sesostris, if we may believe tradition. One thing is certain, that in the year 615 before Jesus Christ, Nikos undertook the works of an alimentary canal to the waters of the Nile across the plain of Egypt, looking toward Arabia. It took 4 days to go up this canal, and it was so wide that 2 triremes could go abreast. It was carried on by Darius, son of Hystasipes, and probably finished by Ptolemy II. Strabo saw it navigated, but its decline from the point of departure near Bubastes to the Red Sea was so slight that it was only navigable for a few months in the year. This canal answered all commercial purposes to the age of Antonius, when it was abandoned and blocked up with sand. Restored by order of the Caliph Omar, it was definitely destroyed in 761 or 762 by Caliph al-Mansur, who wished to prevent the arrival of provisions to Muhammad ben Abdullah, who had revolted against him. During the expedition into Egypt, your General Bonaparte discovered traces of the works of the Desert of Suez, and, surprised by the tide, he nearly perished before regaining Hadjorath, at the very place where Moses had encamped 3,000 years before him. Well, Captain, what the ancients dared not undertake, this junction between the 2 seas, which will shorten the road from Cadiz to India, Monsieur Lesseps has succeeded in doing, and before long he will have changed Africa into an immense island. Yes, Monsieur Aronnax, you have the right to be proud of your countrymen. Such a man brings more honor to a nation than great captains. He began, like so many others, with disgust and rebuffs that he has triumphed, for he has the genius of will, and it is sad to think that a work like that, which ought to have been an international work, and which would have sufficed to make a reign illustrious, should have succeeded by the energy of one man. All honor to Monsieur Lesseps. Yes, honor to the great citizen, honor to the great citizen, I replied, surprised by the manner in which Captain Nemo had just spoken. Unfortunately, he continued, I cannot take you through the Suez Canal, but you will be able to see the long jetty of Port Said after tomorrow, when we shall be in the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean, I exclaimed. Yes, sir. Does that astonish you? What astonishes me is to think that we shall be there the day after tomorrow. Indeed? Yes, Captain, although by this time I ought to have accustomed myself to be surprised at nothing since I have been on board your boat. But the cause of this surprise? Well, it is the fearful speed with you will have to put on the Nautilus if the day after tomorrow she is to be in the Mediterranean, having made the round of Africa and doubled the Cape of Good Hope. Who told you she would make a round of Africa and double the Cape of Good Hope, sir? Well, unless the Nautilus sails on dry land and passes above the isthmus, or beneath it, Monsieur Aronnax. Beneath it? Certainly, replied the Captain Nemo quietly. A long time ago, nature made under this tongue of land what man has this day made on its surface. What? Such a passage exists? Yes, a subterranean passage, which I have named the Arabian Tunnel. It takes us beneath Suez and opens into the Gulf of Pelusium. But this isthmus is composed of nothing but quicksands, to certain depths. But at 55 yards only there is a solid layer of rock. Did you discover this passage by chance? I asked, more and more surprised. Chance and reasoning, sir, and by reasoning even more than by chance. Not only does this passage exist, but I have profited by it several times. Without that, I should not have ventured this day into the impassable Red Sea. I noticed that in the Red Sea and in the Mediterranean there existed a certain number of fishes of a kind perfectly identical. Certain of the fact, I asked myself, was it possible that there was no communication between the two seas? If there was, the subterranean current must necessarily run from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean from the sole cause of difference of level. I caught a large number of fishes in the neighborhood of Suez. I passed a copper ring through their tails and threw them back into the sea. Some months later, on the coast of Syria, I caught some of my fish ornamented with the ring. Thus, the communication between the two was proved. I then sought for it with my Nautilus. I discovered it, ventured into it, and before long, sir, you too will have passed through my Arabian Tunnel. Chapter 5, The Arabian Tunnel. Who says that we keep going? I have 0 people live right now. I will have to drink some water. Mom commented and said hi. So, okay. Chapter 5, The Arabian Tunnel. That same evening, in 21 degrees 30 minutes north latitude, the Nautilus floated on the surface of the sea, approaching the Arabian coast. I saw Jeddah, the most important counting house of Egypt, Syria, Turkey, and India. I distinguished clearly enough its buildings, the vessels anchored at the quays, and those whose draught of water obliged them to anchor in the roads. The sun, rather low on the horizon, struck full on the houses of the town, bringing out their whiteness. Outside, some wooden cabins, and some made of reeds, showed the quarter inhabited by the Bedouins. Soon Jeddah was shut out from view by the shadows of night, and the Nautilus found herself under water slightly phosphorescent. The next day, the 10th of February, we sighted several ships running to windward. The Nautilus returned to its submarine navigation, but at noon, when her bearings were taken, the sea being deserted, she rose again to her waterline. Accompanied by Ned and Consul, I seated myself on the platform. The coast of the eastern side looked like a mass faintly printed upon a damp fog. We were leaning on the sides of the pinnace, talking of one thing and another, when Ned Land, stretching out his hand toward the spot on the sea, said, "Do you see anything there, sir?" "No, Ned," I replied, "but I have not your eyes, you know." "Look well," said Ned, "there on the starboard beam, above the height of the lantern. Do you not see a mass which seems to move?" "Certainly," said I, after close attention. "I see something like a long black body on the top of the water." And certainly before long, the black object was not more than a mile from us. It looked like a great sandbank deposited in the open sea. It was a gigantic dugong. JJ, where are you going? Okay. Ned Land looked eagerly. His eyes shone with covetousness at the sight of the animal. His hand seemed ready to harpoon it. One would have thought he was awaiting the moment to throw himself into the sea and attack it in its element. At this instant, Captain Nemo appeared on the platform. He saw the dugong, understood the Canadian's attitude, and addressing him, said, "If you had held a harpoon just now, Master Land, would it not burn your hand?" "Just so, sir." "And you would not be sorry to go back for one day to your trade of a fisherman and to add this cetacean to the list of those you had already killed?" "I should not, sir." "Well, you can try." "Thank you, sir," said Ned Land, his eyes flaming. "Only," continued the captain, "I advise you for your own sake not to miss the creature." "Is the dugong dangerous to attack?" I asked, in spite of the Canadian's shrug of the shoulders. "Yes," replied the captain. "Sometimes the animal turns upon its assailants and overturns their boat. But for Master Land, this danger is not to be feared. His eye is prompt, his arm is sure." At this moment 7 men of the crew, mute and immovable as ever, mounted the platform. One carried a harpoon and a line similar to those employed in catching whales. The pinnace was lifted from the bridge, pulled from its socket, and let down into the sea. 6 oarsmen took their seats, and the coxswain went to the tiller. Ned, Consul, and I went to the back of the boat. "You are not coming, Captain?" I asked. "No, sir, but I wish you good sport." The boat put off, and lifted by the 6 rowers, drew rapidly toward the dugong, which floated about 2 miles from the Nautilus. Arrived some cable's lengths from the cetacean, the speed slackened, and the oars dipped noiselessly into the quiet waters. Ned Land, the harpoon in hand, stood in the fore part of the boat. A harpoon used for striking the whale is generally attached to a very long cord which runs out rapidly as the wounded creature draws it after him. But here the cord was not more than 10 fathoms long, and the extremity was attached to a small barrel which, by floating, was to show the course of the dugong took under the water. I stood and carefully watched the Canadian's adversary. This dugong, which also bears the name of the halicore, closely resembles the manatee, its oblong body terminated in a lengthened tail and its lateral fins in perfect fingers. Its difference from the manatee consists in its upper jaw, which was armed with 2 long and pointed teeth, which formed on each side the diverging tusks. This dugong, which Ned Land was preparing to attack, was of colossal dimensions. It was more than 7 yards long. It did not move and seemed to be sleeping on the waves, which circumstances made it easier to capture. The boat approached within 6 yards of the animal. The oars rested on the rowlocks. I half rose. Ned Land, his body thrown a little back, brandished the harpoon in his experienced hand. Suddenly a hissing noise was heard, and the dugong appeared. The harpoon, although thrown with great force, had apparently only struck the water. "Curse it!" exclaimed the Canadian furiously. "I have missed it." "No," said I. "The creature is wounded. Look at the blood. But your weapon has not struck its body." "My harpoon! My harpoon!" cried Ned Land. The sailors rowed on, and the coxswain made for the floating barrel. The harpoon regained, we followed in pursuit of the animal. The latter came now and then to the surface to breathe. Its wound had not weakened it, for it shot onwards with great rapidity. The boat, rowed by strong arms, flew on its track. Several times it approached within some few yards, and the Canadian was ready to strike, but the dugong made off with a sudden plunge, and it was impossible to reach it. Imagine the passion which excited impatient Ned Land. He hurled at the unfortunate creature the most energetic expletives in the English tongue. For my part, I was only vexed to see the dugong escape all our attacks. We pursued it without relaxation for an hour, and I began to think it would prove difficult to capture, when the animal, possessed with the perverse idea of vengeance, of which he had cause to repent, turned upon the pinnace and assailed us in its turn. This maneuver did not escape the Canadian. "Look out!" he cried. The coxswain had some words in his outlandish tongue, doubtless warning the men to keep on their guard. The dugong came within 20 feet of the boat, stopped, sniffed the air briskly with its large nostrils, not pierced at the extremity, but in the upper part of its muzzle. Then, taking a spring, he threw himself upon us. The pinnace could not avoid the shock, and half upset shipped at least 2 tons of water, which had to be emptied, but, thanks to the coxswain, we caught it sideways, not full front, so we were not quite overturned. While Ned Land, clinging to the bows, belaboured the gigantic animal with blows from his harpoon, the creature's teeth were buried in the gunwale, and it lifted the whole thing out of the water, as a lion does a roebuck. We were upset over one another, and I know not how the adventure would have ended if the Canadian, still enraged with the beast, had not struck it to the heart. I heard its teeth grind on the iron plate, and the dugong disappeared, carrying the harpoon with him. But the barrel soon returned to the surface, and shortly after the body of the animal turned on its back. The boat came up with it, took it in tow, and made straight for the Nautilus. It required tackle of enormous strength to hoist the dugong onto the platform. It weighed 10,000 pounds. The next day, 11th of February, the larder of the Nautilus was enriched by some more delicate game. A flight of sea swallows rested on the Nautilus. It was a species of Sterna nilotica peculiar to Egypt. Its beak is black, head gray and pointed, the eyes surrounded by white spots, the black wings and tail of a grayish color, the belly and throat white and claws red. They also took some dozen of Nile ducks, a wild bird of high flavor, its throat and upper part of the head white with black spots. About 5 o'clock in the evening, we sighted to the north the Cape of Ras Mohammed. This cape forms the extremity of Arabia Petraea, comprised between the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. The Gulf of Aqaba. The Nautilus penetrated into the Straits of Jubal, which leads to the Gulf of Suez. I distinctly saw a high mountain towering between the 2 gulfs of Ras Mohammed. It was Mount Horeb, that Sinai at the top of which Moses saw God face to face. At 6 o'clock, the Nautilus, sometimes floating, sometimes immersed, passed some distance from Tor, situated at the end of the bay, the waters of which seemed tinted with red, an observation already made by Captain Nemo. Then night fell in the midst of the heavy silence, sometimes broken by the cries of the pelican and other night's birds, and the noise of the waves breaking upon the shore, chafing against the rocks, or the panting of some far-off steamer beating the waters of the Gulf with its noisy paddles. From 8 to 9 o'clock, the Nautilus remained some fathoms under the water. According to my calculation, we must have been very near Suez. Through the panel of the salon, I saw the bottom of the rocks brilliantly lit up by our electric lamp. We seemed to be leaving the straits behind us more and more. At 9:15, the vessel having returned to the surface, I mounted the platform most impatient to pass through Captain Nemo's tunnel. I could not stay in one place, so came to breathe the fresh night air. Soon in the shadow I saw a pale light, half discolored by the fog, shining about a mile from us. "A floating lighthouse," said someone near me. I turned and saw the captain. "It is the floating light of Suez," he continued. "It will not be long before we gain the entrance of the tunnel." "The entrance cannot be easy?" "No, sir. For that reason I am accustomed to go into the steersman's cage, and myself direct our course. And now, if you will go down, Monsieur Aronnax, the Nautilus is going under the waves and will not return to the surface until we have passed through the Arabian Tunnel." Captain Nemo led me toward the central staircase. Halfway down, he opened a door, traversed the upper deck, and landed in the pilot's cage, which, it may be remembered, rose at an extremity of the platform. It was a cabin measuring 6 feet square, very much like that occupied by the pilot on the steamboats of the Mississippi or the Hudson. In the midst worked a wheel placed vertically and caught to the tiller rope which ran to the back of the Nautilus. 4 light ports with lenticular glasses let in a groove in the partition of the cabin allowed the man at the wheel to see in all directions. This cabin was dark, but soon my eyes accustomed themselves to the obscurity, and I perceived the pilot, a strong man, with his hands resting on the spokes of the wheel. Outside, the sea appeared vividly lit up by the lantern, which shed its rays from the back of the cabin to the other extremity of the platform. Now, said Captain Nemo, let us try to make our passage. Electric wires connected the pilot's cage from the machinery room, and from there the captain could communicate simultaneously to his Nautilus the direction and the speed. He pressed a metal knob, and at once the speed of the screw diminished. I looked in silence at the high straight wall we were running by at this moment, the immovable base of a massive sandy coast. We followed it thus for an hour, only some few yards off. Captain Nemo did not take his eye from the knob, suspended by its 2 concentric circles in the cabin. At a simple gesture, the pilot modified the course of the Nautilus every instant. I had placed myself at the port scuttle and saw some magnificent substructures of coral, zoophyte, seaweed, and fucus agitating their enormous claws, which stretched out from the fissures of the rock. At 10:15, the captain himself took the helm. A large gallery, black and deep, opened before us. The Nautilus went boldly into it. A strange roaring was heard round its sides. It was the waters of the Red Sea, which the incline of the tunnel precipitated violently toward the Mediterranean. The Nautilus went with the torrent, rapid as an arrow, in spite of the efforts of the machinery, which, in order to offer more effective resistance, beat the waves with reverse screw. On the walls of the narrow passage I could see nothing but brilliant rays, straight lines, furrows of fire traced by the great speed under the brilliant electric light. My heart beat fast. At 10:35, Captain Nemo quitted the helm and, turning to me, said, "The Mediterranean." In less than 20 minutes, the Nautilus, carried along by the torrent, had passed through the Isthmus of Suez. And I think that's where we're going to stop for the evening. Chapter 6 is called The Grecian Archipelago. The first word is the. And I hope that you are enjoying the... Oh, here's JJ pretending that he wears glasses. He's so cute. Oh, he's wearing like goggles or something.
I'm wearing
like
Nerf.
Oh,
they're from Nerf, so you don't hit your eyes.
Perfect.
But you can't aim with them on.
All right, so we're gonna get our kids put in bed now, and I hope that you are all having a good night. I hope that we get to have some good comments later on with the locations of some of those places that we showed you along the Red Sea. And God bless you tonight, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Adieu.